Imagine the deepest betrayal coming not from a stranger, but from someone trusted, someone loved. This is the tragic story of an elderly grandmother whose life took a devastating turn when the very grandson she raised committed an unthinkable act. What started as a horrifying crime turned into something even more heartbreaking when she discovered she had been infected with HIV. But this grandmother was not one to stay silent. Instead of letting pain and despair consume her, she chose a path that no one saw coming. Her response was shocking, fierce, and left an entire community in disbelief. What she did next wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message. But was it justice, or did she go too far? Stay with me as we uncover the shocking truth behind this harrowing story, and let me know in the comments, what would you have done in her place? She had always been a kind, loving woman, someone who dedicated her life to family, especially to the grandson she had raised since he was a child. He was supposed to be her pride and joy, the one she thought would take care of her in her old age. But one night changed everything. That night, the person she trusted most became the source of her deepest pain. She never imagined that the boy she once cradled in her arms could be capable of something so cruel. At first, she stayed silent, too ashamed and broken to tell anyone. But when she started falling sick, the truth slowly unraveled. A hospital visit confirmed her worst nightmare. She had been infected with HIV. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. The people around her could see the change in her eyes. Something inside her had snapped, and from that moment, she was no longer the same person. As the days passed, the grandmother became more withdrawn, the weight of the betrayal settling heavy on her shoulders. She refused to speak to anyone about what had happened. The truth hung over her like a shadow, but she couldn't bring herself to face it, at least not yet. The virus, too, had started to take its toll on her body, but it wasn't just the physical symptoms that weighed her down. It was the emotional devastation. How could someone she loved so deeply betray her in the most unimaginable way? Meanwhile, her grandson seemed oblivious to the fact that his actions had not only shattered her life, but had also left a scar on his own soul. His behavior had changed. He'd become reckless, indifferent to the damage he had caused, treating the situation with an eerie sense of entitlement. His family members were starting to notice, but no one connected the dots. They couldn't have known. No one could. But there was something else brewing in the grandmother's heart. A quiet storm of revenge and justice. She began researching the virus, learning about its effects, and looking for any way to make sure the truth came out. She couldn't let this go unnoticed. But would her quest for justice drive her to do something irreversible? The line between right and wrong blurred as the anger and betrayal boiled within her. And the community, still unaware of the full extent of what had happened, began to wonder, what would she do next? The grandmother's obsession with revenge deepened, and so did the mystery surrounding her. She became almost unrecognizable, her mind clouded by a singular purpose. She began spending long hours alone, making phone calls, quietly working in the background. People noticed her strange behavior. She was distant, cold even, but no one could figure out what was really happening inside her. Every time she crossed paths with her grandson, there was a chilling tension in the air. The guilt he should have felt seemed to be replaced by arrogance, as if he believed he was untouchable. The whispers in the community grew louder. Some speculated she had changed, become more withdrawn due to her health problems. Others thought it was the trauma of the betrayal, but no one truly understood the storm brewing inside her, the silent fury building with every passing day. She was no longer just a grandmother, she was a force of nature, and the consequences of her silence were about to erupt. It was a quiet evening when the moment came. The grandson, oblivious as ever, returned to his grandmother's home, still unaware of the truth she was about to unveil. But something was different this time. The air felt thicker, like it was heavy with unspoken words. She had finally reached the point where she could no longer hold back. The question wasn't if something would happen, it was when. Would she finally expose the horror of what had been done to her? Or had she decided on a different kind of reckoning, something even more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The moment arrived, but it wasn't the confrontation everyone had been expecting. As the grandson entered the house, his grandmother didn't say a word. Her eyes, cold and unblinking, followed his every move as he sat down, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. For a moment, it seemed as though nothing was going to happen, until she suddenly rose from her chair, her hands trembling slightly, but there was no fear in her eyes, only determination. Without a word, she walked to a drawer and pulled out a small, tattered envelope. It was the kind of envelope one wouldn't expect to hold anything important, but inside, there was a legal document, a piece of paper that would change everything. The grandson, sensing the shift in the room, looked up, confused. But it wasn't just the document that made the air heavy. It was the fact that, hidden beneath the paperwork, was something else entirely, a camera. In that instant, everything fell into place. She had been recording him all along, documenting his every move, every slip-up, and every lie. She had been watching him, not with a desire for vengeance alone, but with a plan. The recording wasn't just evidence of his crime, it was her weapon. The grandmother had been one step ahead this entire time, building a case so airtight that even his defiance couldn't escape it. But the plot twisted even further. Just as she moved to speak, the grandson did something unexpected. His face, once smug and careless, now flickered with fear. He wasn't just the perpetrator, he was hiding something even darker, a secret that could undo everything. His reaction sent a jolt of realization through her. The documents, the recordings, they were only the beginning of a much larger mystery. And now, both of their fates hung in the balance. As the tension reached its peak, she stared at him, knowing this wasn't just a moment of reckoning. It was the start of something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. Would she expose everything now, or was the truth more complex than either of them could have imagined? The room fell silent as the grandmother held the envelope in her trembling hands, her eyes locked on her grandson's face. The camera, positioned discreetly, had captured everything, every lie, every step he had taken to cover his tracks. She had known all along that this moment would come, but the revelation that he wasn't— And just before the screen fades to black, the camera catches one final glimpse of the grandmother's face, her expression unreadable. The truth, no matter how carefully hidden, had finally surfaced. But was it enough to break free? Or had they both been trapped in a game much larger than either of them ever realized? As the truth sank in, the room remained eerily quiet, both of them haunted by the weight of the past. The grandson, now visibly broken, crumpled under the realization that the monster he had become was a product of years of pain, a legacy he had never understood until it was too late. The grandmother, once driven by a thirst for justice, now saw only the raw scars of a family destroyed by secrecy and silence. In the days that followed, the community was left in shock, trying to piece together what had really happened. The grandmother, despite the overwhelming burden, chose to break the cycle, though not through vengeance. Instead, she began speaking out, telling her story with the hope that it would spark change, not just for her family, but for others who carried hidden pain. In the end, the story wasn't about revenge. It was about healing and the painful but necessary confrontation with the past. The question wasn't whether justice was served, but whether forgiveness could be found, both for the grandson and for herself.